Coming up, a breakout performance from McCall Bridges and a massive comeback victory for the Pacers. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts join us every day to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. McCall Bridges had a career night in Brooklyn, leading the team and willing them to victory over the Miami Heat. Locked On Nets and Locked On Heat, and to go over everything for you post-game.
Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets, coming at you following a Nets win where there was three stories to tell. McCall Bridges, and McCall Bridges. In his third game in Brooklyn, after coming over from the Kevin Durant trade, McCall Bridges drops 45 points on 17 for 24 shooting. It was all about him tonight, where he just looked absolutely dominant, a star in the making. Could the Nets have actually won the Durant trade? We won't get ahead of ourselves with that, but we are going to be talking about this game, a big Nets win over the Heat going into the All-Star break, and what the future now holds in Brooklyn, looking a little brighter when it looked very bleak just a week ago. We'll be talking all about all that and more over on Locked On Nets.
Duncan Robinson's return wasn't enough to jolt the Heat's three-point shooting to life, and the Heat were outscored by 27 from three-point range in Wednesday's loss to the Nets. I'm Wes Goldberg of Locked On Heat. The Heat lost again when making single-digit threes. They have 14 such games this season, and they've lost 8 of them, including this 116-105 loss in Brooklyn. The Heat went just 8 of 28 from three-point range, despite Duncan Robinson playing his first game in more than a month. Meanwhile, the Nets shot 17 of 39, outscoring the Heat by 27 from distance. It's just hard to win basketball games like that in 2023. Still, the Heat were hanging around before McCall Bridges, who came over from Phoenix in the Kevin Durant deal, scored 13 straight points in the fourth quarter to break things open for the Nets. He ended up with a career-high 45. Of the Heat players, only Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and Duncan Robinson made multiple threes. 5 of Miami's 9 rotation players did not take a three at all. I'll repeat that. It's just hard to win basketball games like that in 2023. This is just a flawed roster for the Heat, and they were again without Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry, and Victor Oladipo, but what was last season's best three-point shooting team now ranks among the NBA's worst three-point shooting teams. And with just 23 games left after the All-Star break, there's not much time to turn things around. For how the Heat can ignite their three-point shooting, Duncan Robinson's encouraging impact, and more, tune into Locked On Heat on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
A nail-biter with the Grizzlies and the Jazz last night in Memphis. Locked On Grizzlies relieved to see their team hold on and get the win.
Whew, that was a little too close for comfort, am I right? Man, the Memphis Grizzlies like to make it interesting sometimes when it doesn't need to be. But the win was secured. Memphis gets to 35 victories before the All-Star break. And Jaren Jackson Jr. shows everybody exactly why he was selected to go out to Salt Lake along with the Jazz following this game for All-Star weekend. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and no Larry Markkinen for Utah. Colin Sexton gets hurt early. Should have been a pretty easy win. And for a while for the Grizzlies, it was. They were up by double digits throughout the night. Early parade of three-point shots in FedEx Forum. But then the Jazz fought back and competed hard and got it within single digits, even almost tied the game at one point. But the Grizzlies were able to hold on to their lead. Ja Morant made big buckets late. And Jaren Jackson Jr., multiple stocks, multiple threes in the first half, showing everyone why he deserves the All-Star honor that he received. He's heading out to Salt Lake right now.
The Pacers were in desperate need of a win lately, and boy did they deliver last night with a massive come-from-behind win to beat Chicago. Locked On Bulls goes off on the late-game collapse, and Locked On Pacers is all smiles.
The Chicago Bulls have lost 5 games in a row after taking a L to the Indiana Pacers in a game in which they lead by 24. There was a lot of positives in this game, a lot of things that we could have pointed to if the Bulls end up winning this game that you would say, hey, a Bulls team with without DeMar DeRozan, without DJJ, came out and won this game. I love what we saw from the young players in this game. Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry did some good things, right? Zach LaVine came out and had an excellent game, but at the end of the game, that the Bulls come out and lose in a fashion of just like Indiana started playing tough defense and the Chicago Bulls did not, which has been how the Chicago Bulls have lost many a game this season, right? When teams play tougher, we see the Bulls losing their 5th game in a row yet again. So another tough loss. Hopefully they'll be able to turn it around tomorrow versus Milwaukee, but we'll be talking about all that and more over on Locked On Bulls. Me and Hayes will be breaking that down, man. See you guys over there.
Holy smokes, what a comeback win for the Indiana Pacers to close out their pre-All-Star game stretch. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, here to tell you about the Pacers' 24-point comeback win over the Chicago Bulls at home. They were getting smoked in the first quarter. It was 39-15 after the first quarter. And then the Pacers had maybe one of their best defensive 3 consecutive quarters to close out the game. They only give up 74 points over the last 3 quarters of this game. Did a great job of slowing Zach LaVine and the rest of the Bulls, and that kind of set the tone for much of the second half of this game, where the Pacers defended really well and scored just enough to slowly catch up and finally take the lead late in this game to pull off a huge 24-point comeback against the Bulls. And at the same time, Buddy Hield, 27-point half. He hit 6 threes, which was enough for him to set the Pacers franchise record for threes in a season. He passed a legendary shooter in Reggie Miller. We'll break down all that on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
Coming up, the Celtics go into the All-Star break in first place in the East. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. New customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you have to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is super safe and secure and easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to how many three-pointers will be drained in the game as well. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your first no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Detroit was not able to keep pace as the Celtics finally got some of their starters back out on the court. Locked On Pistons goes over the bright spots. Locked On Celtics getting healthy and back to full strength.
James Wiseman scores 11 points and gets 5 rebounds in his first game with the Detroit Pistons in 23 minutes of action. Host of Locked On Pistons podcast, Kuka Hill here. I thought James Wiseman looked pretty good in his opening game with the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, there's some confusion on offense regarding sets and where to be. It's his first game, didn't get a lot of practice time. You expected to see that. Defensively, there was a few possessions where it looked like there was some miscommunications on switches. But to be honest, I actually thought I saw a few good defensive reps from him in drop coverage, rim protection. He forced a turnover from Malcolm Brogdon, going up around the rim, taking the shot away, then using his length to take away the kick out as well, forcing a turnover. I thought that was a really nice play from him too. And then offensively, I don't think the Pistons really used him in a creative way and really tried to use him in the ways he can be used. I think we'll see that after the All-Star break. And despite that, he still scored 11 points in 23 minutes. I'm excited to see how they get to use him after the All-Star break, but I thought first game with the Detroit Pistons, I thought it was fine.
Marcus Smart returned. Jayson Tatum dominated, and the Boston Celtics get a big win over Detroit to close out the first portion of their schedule. I'm John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast. Yeah, Jayson Tatum had a casual 38, 9, and 7. That's what a superstar is supposed to do. But it was Marcus Smart with 9 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 6 steals that was really the dominant player in this game early on for the Celtics. He just set the tone with his defense, and the Celtics were able to put together a big early lead. Yes, the Pistons made their run in the third quarter, and that's where Tatum really shone because his 24 points in the third quarter alone helped keep this game close. The Celtics started attacking the rim in the fourth quarter. That was the difference in this game. And then afterwards, they put together an 11-0 run to really seal this thing. But Smart with the defense early and the Celtics attacking the rim on a night where they shot 45 threes. It really was those attacking the rim moments in the fourth quarter that was the difference. Now the Celtics can head into the All-Star break in first place.
Atlanta looked like they went into the All-Star break a little bit early. They slept walk through their game with the Knicks. Locked On Hawks goes over some issues. Locked On Knicks, pleased with the end of the first half of the season for New York.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks fall to the New York Knicks on this Wednesday evening. They flop, I should say, a final score of 122-101 at home for the Hawks in their final game before the All-Star break. Atlanta just fell apart in the first half in particular, down 22 at the break in what I would describe as probably the biggest game of the season to this point for the Hawks. There was a tiebreaker on the line, a season series on the line against the Knicks, and of course the Hawks and Knicks are competing for playoff positioning, but Atlanta just didn't show up out of the gate in this one. They couldn't make jump shots. They set a season low for three-pointers in this game, and while they had some strengths, including taking care of the ball, the rest of the team kind of fell apart defensively, on the glass, etc., and it was a recipe for disaster for the Hawks at home in this spot. They definitely need the All-Star break now, as the entire league does, I'm sure, but the Hawks are certainly in dire need of a something to reset basically the tenor of this season, and the Hawks will have a chance to do that over the next 8 days. But in the end, Atlanta is now 29-30 before the All-Star break, and we'll have a full slate of coverage on the Locked On Hawks podcast.
A 3-game winning streak for the New York Knicks heading into the All-Star break after a 122-101 win in Atlanta. I'm Gavin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Julius Randle was cooking to start the game. Jalen Brunson was cooking to finish it, and the Knicks cruised to a surprisingly easy win against their sort of longtime rivals, the Hawks. I want to shout out Isaiah Hartenstein, though. I mean, him and Julius Randle, incredible work on the glass at the end of this third quarter when the Hawks were pushing their way back into this game. The duo combined for 9 points on tip-ins in just 2 minutes and 7 seconds to wrap up the third. Their physicality, their touch, their timing all stood out as the Knicks held off Atlanta and then finished this one up in the fourth for a big win heading into the break.
LeBron, Anthony Davis, and trade deadline addition D'Angelo Russell had enough to take down New Orleans on Wednesday. Locked On Pelicans is hopeful that the All-Star break will spark a change for this team in the second half of the season.
After the loss to the Lakers, the All-Star break can't come soon enough for the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans. With New Orleans looking to build some momentum going into the All-Star break, the wheels fell off in the Pelicans' loss to the Lakers, a team they have so much incentive to beat. While CJ McCollum played well, scoring 22 points, and Brandon Ingram did his best, scoring 25 despite constant double teams, no one else truly stepped up for the Pelicans, and it was a slog to simply score 102 points. And defensively, not much better. The Pelicans need the All-Star break badly, and not to get healthy since Zion still will be out weeks after the break, but for head coach Willie Green to look in the mirror and figure out how to get this team moving again. The Pelicans are 9th place in the Western Conference, the play-in tournament, and things shouldn't be this hard for a team with this much talent. Rotations certainly need to change, more structure needs to be in place offensively, and some guys need to have a much shorter leash if they're having an off night. Let's see if they can get right and refreshed after the break.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of Locked On Lakers podcast, and the Lakers get a much-needed win heading into the All-Star break, 120-102 over the Pelicans. LeBron James available after dealing with the persistent ankle foot soreness that's been dogging him all season. Mo Bamba active and available after finally serving the suspension that began when he was still with the Orlando Magic. And for the first time in a long time, Darvin Ham has an entire roster healthy and available to make his choices, busts out a brand new starting lineup: LeBron, AD, D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt. A look that a lot of Laker fans, at least the ones populating the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, have been wanting to see, and for at least one game, successful. LeBron, AD, and D'Lo all 20 points or more, and the Lakers still have a lot of ground to make up, but at least they go into this break on a positive note, able to recharge. A lot more to get into, so make sure you are subscribing to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and that you make Locked On Lakers the first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.